Alrighty, folks. Welcome to the first episode of the 2021 NFL season of the Big Blues podcast, presented by 366 Sports. Little rundown of how this is going to work. So Matt and I, we've been talking about doing a Giants podcast for a while. We do the live streams, every Sunday and before every game. But we want to do a different form of content just to kind of get everybody plugged into 366 Sports and what's going on with the Giants in just a different way. You could take us in your car. You could take us on your boat, wherever you're listening, in the gym,
the shower. I hope we're with you in the shower.
Yes, definitely listen to us in the shower. Anywhere really, listen to it. If your wife's arguing with you, just put your AirPods on and just listen to us instead. So there's a lot of different directions in which you could listen to this. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and essentially we're going to start our podcast this year with a state of the franchise. So that's going to be this episode. So we're going to give our takes on the biggest three pieces of this franchise right now, which are Joe Judge, Dave Gettleman, and Daniel Jones. Mainly Daniel Jones is the biggest one. And then we're going to do another State of the Franchise episode with offense and another State of the Franchise episode with defense. So we're kind of starting out in a three-part prong, if you will. So it's going to be that. So, guys, we're going to plug ourselves, though, before we jump in. If you don't like us at Facebook.com/New York Giants 366. Go ahead and do that. It's actually Facebook.com/Giants 366. And then as well as Twitter, we are at Giants 366 on Twitter. Give us a follow. We're the best Giants page out there, not to brag.
Not to brag,
but we are. So that's how we're going to do it. So we're going to do this every week this season. We're going to give you at least one episode, and we're going to make sure we commit to it because we both have time. So with that being said, let's get to it. Let's get to the fun. And let's talk about the state of the Giants. So, Matt, I know we were talking when we started this how we wanted to break this episode up and do Joe Judge, Dave Gettleman, and Daniel Jones, or as we like to call it, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I think we should pause here. What do you, listeners, who do you think is the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Yeah,
take a second.
Take a
pause,
couple seconds.
Pause the podcast. All right. The good is Joe Judge, at least
Obviously.
right now. Right now, we think.
I am a Joe Judge guy. I think more than you.
I'm on the fence. I'm leaning good.
I'm all in.
Well, we're gonna talk about this. The bad is Daniel Jones,
Right.
and the ugly is Dave Gettleman.
Yeah. I hate Dave Gettleman.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about that.
Not as a person, as a GM. He seems like a nice guy.
We're gonna talk about that as well. But I think let's start things off on a positive note. Let's talk about Joe Judge, and kind of again, this is the state of the franchise. Joe Judge seems to be the most capable head coach the Giants have had since Tom Coughlin.
Yes, and listen, the bar was low. The bar was so low. It could not have gotten worse. The bar could not have gotten any lower than it did. Dealing with, Ben McAdoo and Pat Shurmur. But Joe Judge has clearly come in here and at least he's established a culture in his first year. He's learned how to make the most. Like last year, he really made wine out of water in a lot of situations.
I mean, yeah, the roster last year wasn't very good. The Giants won enough games where you kind of were able to say this was a successful first season from a rookie head coach with no actual real offseason.
Right.
So, and then obviously you kind of saw every offseason move, for the most part, that the Giants made, outside of maybe drafting Andrew Thomas, worked really well. They put big money into James Bradbury. They put big money into Blake Martinez. And you kind of saw, like, Joe Judge, is his handprint is on this football team. And everything he touched last offseason, for the most part, either turned to gold or was pretty damn good.
Yeah, and then, Patrick Graham, he brought in Patrick Graham to the staff, which, hand up, we were wrong about that hiring. I think we were both. It's funny, I think, at least me, I was a little bit more excited about Garrett. I'm like, well, he was always his teams were always decent as a head coach. I thought he'd be a good coordinator. He's a terrible coordinator. And I was not excited about Patrick Graham because his defense in Miami sucked. But he was great. Patrick Graham's been great.
And, yeah, I mean, I think it was one of those things in Miami with Graham that, and kind of, as we're talking about this, all the coaching staff falls under Judge. Judge is in charge of the coaching staff for the most part. So,
Is he, though? Because I don't think he was allowed to fire Jason Garrett this year.
You definitely are seeing Judge put Jason Garrett in an uncomfortable situation where it's perform or get canned.
Yeah.
So, as we're kind of talking about Joe Judge, he assembled a very good staff. And that staff kind of, the coaching staff was definitely the highlight of the season last year because the Giants, in many ways, especially defensively, outperformed the talent.
Big time. And I want that clear. Last year's Giants defense, they overperformed. I'm not saying there's not guys that could still play on that defense, and we'll do a whole episode on the defense soon. But the defense definitely last season, they played above their pay grade, which is good. That means you have good coaches.
Exactly. And that's one of those things when you're looking at Joe Judge and you're trying to say, okay, we're doing the State of a Franchise episode. What do we have in Joe Judge? We clearly have a head coach who is capable of making his players better. You kind of were able to see it where everyone that came to the Giants, whether it was a free agent or whether they were already on the team, especially on that defensive side of the ball, they were better this year. They had the best season of their career, and that's coaching. That is coaching.
Yeah, big time. That means you put your players in a position to succeed, which, as a coach, that's your number one job. So Joe Judge, as far as I'm concerned, he's the good. When you look at the future, he's the guy you have a program with. Obviously, in the NFL, it's a lot easier to find a coach than it is a quarterback. So let's maybe talk about you want to talk about the bat, or you want to talk about Gettleman first?
Well, I kind of wanted to pose a question before we move off Joe Judge. Why is it, Dan? And maybe it's not paying attention to Giants football, but it seems like a lot of the national media right now, they're ranking Joe Judge pretty close to the bottom of coaches. And I realize the Giants didn't win a lot of football games last year, but it's not like they lost a lot of football games because of coaching. You saw Judge get better as a coach as the year went along.
Yeah.
So is this just media's looking at record, or is there something else maybe we don't know about?
I think what it is, Matt, I think it's last year the Giants started, 1-7?
They did start off 1-7.
Right. So with Judge, and I think with the Giants, starting out that poorly, right, I just think the national media stopped paying attention to the team when the team's 1-7. And they didn't care about the win at Seattle. They didn't care about all that stuff. And quite frankly, I mean, Giants fans have completely overstocked that win, too. I will say that. There's some people who said it's the most underrated win in team history, and I think that is such crap, to be honest. But when it comes down to it, I think the national media didn't pay a ton of attention to the Giants over the course of down the stretch because there were just way more interesting things to cover. So I think that's a big part of it. But I think I think he's a good head coach. I don't know if he's a great head coach yet, but I'm all in on him. I think he should at least be leading the ship for the next few years.
Okay, I was going to say, let's give everyone the audio clip that they can clip. You're all in on Joe Judge.
I'm all in on Joe Judge.
I'm going to be boring, and I'm going to say I'm still in wait and see. I'm leaning towards I like the hire. I'm leaning towards I like the coach. I'm leaning towards he has the ability to build this team. But we're about to talk about it. He has kind of latched himself to Dave Gettleman and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, and that maybe isn't the wagon you want to hitch yourself to. But I think, when it does come down to it, and let's go into Dave Gettleman here. And I'll say this about Joe Judge, I guess, before we move on. But Joe Judge won my heart the day he allegedly maybe possibly fought Mark Colombo, which probably didn't happen. That definitely didn't actually happen. But just in my head, him fighting Mark Colombo, who's like 6'8" and played in the NFL. Again, it didn't happen, but if it did happen, that's when he stole my heart. So, anyway, let's move on.
Dave Gettleman.
Dave Gettleman. It might have happened, though. We don't know. But anyway, probably didn't, though. Dave Gettleman.
But did it?
The ugly. Dave Gettleman.
So
I hate him.
I want to start off, again, state of the franchise. It's never a good sign when you hire a GM and he fires his first head coach. It's never a good sign. It means
Within
something
2
went
years.
wrong. And then you kind of saw it in the first offseason, and you really saw it this offseason, Dan. Is this Dave Gettleman's team?
I don't think it is. I don't know if it is. I don't know if he's just a figurehead. I don't know anymore.
And the Giants are going to tell you it doesn't matter. And you know what? It really doesn't. If the Giants win 10 games this year, they go 10-7 and they make the playoffs, I don't think anyone's really going to be asking, is this Dave Gettleman's team or is this Joe Judge's team? It's the New York Giants. But just we've seen Joe Judge take such a step, and we've seen the philosophy change so much. I mean, they traded back twice this year in the first 2 rounds.
Right.
Dave Gettleman's never traded down before. And I realize that he's tried, But I mean, they really made it happen this year. I mean, you kind of saw you're seeing Judge build up the secondary, which is a New England Patriots move. That's not a Dave Gettleman move. So it's one of those things where it's like, how much of Dave Gettleman is the ugly. How much influence does he have now on the roster? Obviously, there is some. Does he have final say? We don't know.
Yeah, and that's why I think we kind of got to in some ways, link Gettleman and Judge together, because they do say it's collaborative, and I do believe it is collaborative. It only makes sense for it to be collaborative. But I really think that Gettleman needs to at least be close to being a playoff team this year if he's going to keep his job. Because if he doesn't, with the amount of money the Giants spent this offseason, which, let's be honest, they overpaid everybody.
They did.
They did. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean they might not be good players, but regardless of it, they completely overpaid these guys to come here. And they have to. When you suck for so long, you have to overpay guys to come play for you.
Wait, you mean it wasn't Logan Ryan?
Oh, yeah. I know, Logan Ryan, yeah. Because he played on a team with Adoree Jackson once.
You mean to tell me, Dan, that Adoree Jackson signed with the Giants for the $14 million a year and not because of the dinner with Logan Ryan?
It might have been a combination of both.
Okay. Because
Logan Ryan said he was going to recruit guys. It's almost like A.J. Brown recruited Julio to the Titans via trade.
Yeah. So it obviously had nothing to do about the money. It was all Logan Ryan. Just want to make that very clear.
Yeah, that's it. So you're right. So besides the Logan Ryan factor for Adoree, who Adoree said Logan Ryan's like an older brother to him. But the Giants overpaid Galladay, and I like Galladay. I'm a fan of the signing, but it doesn't change the fact that it was a complete overpayment. Like, Gettleman's, all his chips are on the table at this point.
And as we're talking about the offseason, we're talking about the moves Dave Gettleman has done. Didn't it kind of, and we're talking about kind of the influence Judge has on the roster, didn't the Devontae Booker signing just kind of feel like Joe Judge just gave Dave Gettleman a win?
Yeah.
It was like, the kid comes home from school, he drew a picture, you put it on the fridge. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, because Gettleman thinks it's 1975 and you need running backs. And realistically speaking, I mean, if we didn't have Saquon Barkley and Devontae Booker was going to be our number one running back, that'd be fine. And the Giants would make no difference on our win total next year. And that a lot of people might not want to hear that, but running backs don't matter. Booker's a fine running back, but like, it was a stupid contract to give out when you have Saquon.
And it was, and I think a lot of people are as we're talking about Gettleman being the ugly, I think a lot of fans are kind of turning towards, Dave Gettleman's right all along. Dave Gettleman's been so good. Dave Gettleman's been really wrong for a majority of his time with the team. And, they nailed a couple of free agent signings last year, and that's about it.
Literally about it. It's looking like Gettleman missed on the quarterback. He hasn't hit on like really any third-round pick or beyond. It's looking like, maybe aside from Darius Slayton, who's a complimentary player at this point. So the drafting's been bad. The signings the lion's share of the signings have been bad. He doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt.
As excited as I think the fan base is and should be for Joe Judge, there is reason to be excited about Joe Judge.
For sure.
They should be equally as concerned and worried that Dave Gettleman is still somewhat. He has a hand on the wheel.
Isn't he like 70?
Yeah.
Why is he still working?
But
why can't he just retire?
But Dave Gettleman does have a hand on the wheel, and that, as a Giants fan, that has to concern you. We've been through this enough. We've seen enough of Dave Gettleman over the past three years that it should be concerning.
Yeah, because he's proven time and time again that he's not competent with us and with the Panthers, and it seems like he's tried to delegate some things, but I'm not a fan. I also want to talk about the draft, because this is the biggest mixed bag of a draft class I feel like we've ever had as a Giants.
It's okay. So I think a lot of people think this draft is a home run,
which is crazy to me.
And
it is crazy if you think that.
And it's the extra picks that the Giants got, which, by the way, if just in case you're wondering, those extra picks are for if Daniel Jones doesn't work out. Let's be real. This was a built-in backup plan the Giants made. And of course, you could sit here and you could say, well, the Eagles leapfrogged him for Devonta Smith, which, that was a train wreck in itself. Everyone and their brother knew who the Giants wanted. The Eagles were able to trade with a division rival to go up and get that player right in front of the Giants. absolute train wreck.
I'm still disgusted about that.
It happens every year. Every year. I mean, me and Dan are we're not by any means newsbreakers, and every year we know who the Giants are going to pick. Every year,
single year. We've had it for 4 years now. Every Gettleman draft. So it's happened even beyond Gettleman in his defense,
but I think you should be excited about the fact that we have the Bears pick. The Bears could potentially have a top 10 pick. It's going to be what? It's 4 or 5 picks in the first 60 next year, I think.
I believe it's 7 picks in the first 4 rounds.
Yep, that's great. It's great.
So that is impressive, and that is a good thing to have. But you're right, that is Daniel Jones insurance at this point. But this year, so that aspect of the draft, home run, I agree. But the 2 players we took in the top 2 rounds, Kadarius Toney, I did not have a first-round grade on. Azeez Ojulari was not even in my top 50. And everybody thought, because a bunch of guys like Mel Kiper and Todd McShay projected him as a first-round pick, a bunch of guys on the internet thought, he could be a first-round pick, that they thought it's good value at 50. But Ojulari has so far to go. He's so raw, and he's got good bend, and he's a good pass rusher, but he gets bullied in the run game. He's not going to play every down next year, and fans are going to hate this guy because you have idiots on Twitter pumping his tires saying he's going to get double-digit sacks next year. It's just not going to happen.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about each of these guys individually. We'll talk about Ojulari first.
Yeah.
So I think that the common misconception with the Giants fans is that Ojulari is going to step in and make an immediate impact. And, again, the Giants Giants fans think that this team has to make the playoffs next year for them to be, for Dave Gettleman to save his job. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's why they took.
I want to go on record and say I think that's the case. They got to at least be very close.
Maybe that's why they took a 20. He just turned 21, but at the time a 20-year-old edge rusher who was a little thin, that probably needs some time in an NFL weight room. That definitely needs some NFL coaching. But if, and it is an if things align right, Ojulari could be fantastic.
I'm not saying he can't be, but I think this is going to be a situation where it's a lot closer to Justin Tuck, where Justin Tuck, his first couple seasons was not good, if we're being honest. Like, if you look at Tuck's career, his first couple years were not good.
He was a developing player.
He was. But I think it's the same. It's going to be the same concept with Ojulari, where it's like he's going to need to be groomed. He's going to need to develop. And I think Giants fans are putting incredibly unfair expectations on him based on his college film. He's a one-trick pony. He's a speed rusher. He gets bend. He hits the quarterback. That's all he does. He can't play against the run, which means he can't play every down. He's not a power rusher because he's too small. So there's a very good chance that pick doesn't work out. I'm just saying that right now.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I still there's a good chance any pick doesn't work out. I will say this though, Ojulari, where the Giants drafted him, I thought it was fine value. I thought it was a good pick. I'm not upset by the pick at all. I know you don't like him so much. I think me and you are gonna probably flip flop where you're like, oh, Kadarius Toney. I mean, I didn't have a first round grade on him, but like I didn't hate to pick a 20. Where I'm the opposite. I think Ojulari was a fine pick. Again, we don't even know if that was a Dave Gettleman pick. So as we're evaluating Dave Gettleman, we don't know. We know after the Giants made that pick, Dave Gettleman did not look very happy in the draft room.
He looked angry. And so maybe because Ojulari is more of a new age edge rusher and Gettleman likes the big hog mollies and stuff. So we don't know. We don't know what happened in that war room. But I don't like the pick. And I'll say I hope he works out. I'm rooting for him. But at the end of the day, I'm just calling it as I see it. I'm not a believer. I don't think it's going to work out. I think fans are going to be wildly disappointed.
And as we're talking about these draft picks, I think it's kind of important, as you're thinking back, right, and as you're a fan and you're like, oh, these guys are being downers about these picks. How many of Dave Gettleman's draft picks have worked out so far? That's the question you have to ask yourself.
Because quite frankly, and we'll get into this when we talk about the defense, but I'm tired of hearing. I don't want to hear about Lorenzo Carter and O'Shane Jimenez. I don't want to hear about these crappy players who we take in the 3rd and 4th round anymore. I'm done. They don't work out. Look at the history of Giants 3rd-round picks. We haven't had a good 3rd-round pick since Mario Manningham. So I don't want to hear it, guys. I just don't. So that's where we're at this point. Like, basically speaking, the draft for the Giants should just end after the 2nd round because we found very few good players after that over the past decade. And it extends beyond Gettleman. It's a whole organizational issue. But this is why the team has had one playoff berth in 10 seasons.
So I want to again, we've talked about the draft. I think if you guys have been around the page enough, you know where Dan stands on Ojulari. You know where I probably stand on Tony. So I want to touch on Kadarius Toney rather quickly. I didn't like the pick. So we're lumping Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge here kind of together. I don't know who decided this was the pick. Obviously, everyone agreed that he was the best player available on their board. I didn't like the pick. I don't like taking gadget players in the first round. I know the NFL is changing, and gadget players are going to have a bigger and bigger role. I understand he's a threat down the field because of his speed. He's a threat with the ball in his hands, but nothing about Kadarius Toney, when I watched him on film, said this guy could be a wide receiver 1. And when you're picking a wide receiver at 20, I want the guy to have an opportunity to be a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I agree with you there. My biggest issue with the pick, I don't even hate the player as much because I do think there is a lot of good gadget potential with him. I do think that was too high. If the pick was 35, again, I think I'd have a different attitude towards it. But my attitude with Tony is Jason Garrett's still our OC, right? They didn't let Joe Judge fire him, right?
No, they didn't let Joe Judge fire him.
So until we get an offensive coordinator who is able to use a guy like Kadarius Toney and have a gadget style play, this team's going to stink. Or not just the team, the offense is still going to stink, but this guy is going to stink. He's not going to reach his full potential.
And
it's just not going to happen.
That just kind of and it's one of those things, Dan, where as we're going through the Dave Gettleman kind of tenure, the Giants like to contradict themselves. And they like to do a bunch of they do odd moves. It always seems like there's never a plan. So keeping Jason Garrett this offseason, who cannot, over the course of his coaching career, has never really utilized a player like Kadarius Toney. Keeping him this offseason, then drafting Kadarius Toney, it really makes you wonder, what was the plan here? Because he doesn't fit the offense that we saw last year from Jason Garrett. He doesn't fit any offense that Jason Garrett has ever coached. So do the Giants believe in Jason Garrett? Is Kadarius Toney, Kadarius Toney, is he going to be, utilized better when Freddie Kitchen takes over in week 8? If that happens, is Jason Garrett going to suddenly change his ways after, 2 decades in the NFL?
I think the answer to all that is a resounding no. I don't think he's going to change his ways. I just think they didn't have a plan. I think Gettleman's chips are all on the table, and they said Gettleman realizes his best chance to save his job is if Daniel Jones is good, and he's thinking, let's just get him more and more weapons. Speaking of Daniel Jones,
let's talk about Daniel Jones.
Oh man, so we're both before we jump into the Jones, so we're both out on Gettleman. We both think he should be fired, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been out on I have been personally out on Gettleman since the 2018 draft.
I was gonna say I've been basically out on him since. When was he hired? But really, the Odell trade was a nail in his coffin for me. But regardless, yeah, let's talk about Daniel Jones because this could be the biggest failure of the Gettleman era.
I mean, Dave Gettleman said it himself in his draft presser. They're expecting their year 2 players, guys who were in year 2 last year, to take a big jump in year 3. That's when players make the jump, is what Dave Gettleman said.
Which isn't true. It's not true, but that's what Gettleman thinks.
But, Daniel Jones is supposedly heading into that 3rd-year jump. The Giants have done, weapon-wise, everything they possibly could. And we'll talk about the offensive line. And we're going to take your questions, too. A lot of you guys have questions on the O-line. We're probably going to do that next episode. But, the Giants have thrown money and draft picks and selections and everything at surrounding Daniel Jones with weapons. So this is it. This is it. And guys, we'll know early on. We'll know by week 6 if Daniel Jones is it or not. We will. We will. We'll know by week 6 if Daniel Jones is it.
Yeah, we'll know. And when it comes down to it, I kind of like Colin Cowherd said it. Colin Cowherd stole my take, where Colin Cowherd basically, he's got till Thanksgiving or he's a turkey. That's what Cowherd said, and that was going to be my take. He preemptively stole it. But when it comes down to it, that's the God's honest truth. Gone are the days of waiting years and years and years to see if you have a QB. If Daniel Jones is not the quarterback this year, and there's a good quarterback who comes out, which there could be some decent quarterbacks that come out next year, potentially. The Giants have the picks to move up and get his replacement, and they can't wait. They can't wait around like the Bears have, like the Bears did. because the Bears had wasted that good defense for too long. And there's a chance that the Giants' defense could be decent this year. So
I'm gonna ask you a question, Dan.
let's go.
I'm gonna ask you a question, and I actually want to, for you listeners as well, really think hard about this one. If you took Daniel Jones off this team, and let's say the Giants made a trade for Matthew Stafford, how many wins does that add? Like hypothetically, we went through and I think we one of our live shows, we said the Giants were like 8-9, 9-8, something like that. Adding Matthew Stafford, I mean, they're a playoff team. So they're a playoff team.
Stafford's got to be worth 2 wins compared to Jones. Because Stafford, I know everybody's going to say, oh, he's never won anything. He's played in only 3 wild card games. He played in the Lions. The Lions have wasted so many good players. People this year are finally going to see how good Matthew Stafford is playing with Sean McVay. It's going to be incredible to watch. So people, before you say, oh, you guys are stupid, listen to this again. Go back, put it on your calendar. It is July 1st as we record this. Go listen to this same episode on New Year's. And you're going to be like, oh, yeah, Matthew Stafford's really good. He might be a top 5 quarterback. That's what I think people are going to be saying about him this year with McVay. So he's worth at least 2 wins, at minimum.
And the reason why I'm asking that question is because the Giants now have all of these picks. And if Daniel Jones isn't it, and I think it's safe to say, and I don't know how you're feeling, Dan, but I think it's safe to say that we're both leaning towards he ain't it.
Right. He's not it. I'm out. Just as I was all in on Joe Judge, I'm all out on Jones. I don't need to see another season. I don't need to wait and see. He doesn't have it. There was nothing in college that showed that he had it. There has been nothing so far in the NFL that's really shown he's had it, aside from the first career game he had, which was a complete fluke because teams didn't realize he could run. He doesn't have it. He's not it. And pretending that he's it, and just for the sake of rooting for the guy or trying to lie to ourselves, is not good. He's not it. It's like we know what it looks like. We had Eli Manning as our quarterback for 15 years, 16, whatever it was, 15, whatever it was. Long time we had him for. We know what having a franchise quarterback is because we had one for years and years and years. And I know he looks like Eli Manning a little bit, but he's not Eli, and he's not it. So it's better to cut your losses. Maybe we're able to pull off a miracle trade for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe we're able to pull off, a trade up and get a guy next year. But Jones is not it. Stop lying to yourself.
So this is the state of the franchise with Daniel Jones, and we're gonna talk about Daniel Jones here in a second because we're gonna start taking questions. And again, there's a lot of Daniel Jones questions. I think as a fan base, right, the worst possible place we could be, Dan, is if we don't know. If Daniel Jones is good in some games, bad in other games, and you just don't know.
Well, the reason being is because our team will not move on from him if that's the case.
Yep.
The Giants will not. They'll be like, well, he looks like Eli. He looks just like him. He could be good. And yeah, we either need him to light the world on fire next year or completely suck. Like, no in between. No in between.
And I think that was always and even when he was drafted, that was always the biggest concern is you were going to take, when you were going to take Daniel Jones, you were kind of end up in NFL purgatory, where you were always going to be, maybe if you put a team around him, he'll be good enough to, put you in playoff contention, but you're never going to win anything. But you're never going to be bad enough to draft a quarterback, and suddenly you've wasted 8 years on Andy Dalton. And I think that's the biggest concern, and as Giants fans, that's what you kind of need to be worried about heading into the upcoming season. Is you either need Daniel Jones to be so bad that they're talking about playing Mike Lennon, or you need Daniel Jones to be lighting the world on fire so we could sit here and say, all right, we have a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really where I'm at with it. I'm out on him. I hope I'm wrong. It'd be much easier if I was wrong. But let's get to some questions. How about that? So we had a lot of questions come in. We're going to try to answer them. Basically, we're going to try to answer our Joe Judge, Dave Gettleman, Daniel Jones questions in this episode. Then we'll answer the rest of our offensive questions in the next episode and our defensive questions in the episode after that. So with that being said, let's get to the first question here. And it's pretty simple. It's a pretty good question. that I think everybody here is wondering, and it's from our good friend Matthew, who came on our show on draft night, and he said, if Daniel Jones has another poor season, and either the Giants or the Bears plays poorly enough for a top 5 pick, do the Giants take a quarterback?
Yes. I mean, again, the trade backs, everything like that, I'll make this very clear. Joe Judge, at the end of the season, if the reason why the Giants aren't good is because of Daniel Jones, is going to be able to march into John Mara's office and say, I did not pick this quarterback. This quarterback was given to me. You cannot fire me because I did not pick this quarterback. You have to give me an opportunity to pick my own quarterback. And if Daniel Jones is not good this year, they're going to let Joe Judge pick his own quarterback.
Which would be the fair thing to do, by the way. And this is why you should have fired Dave Gettleman when you fired Pat Shurmur, because we could have had a completely new slate. But that's what bad teams do. Bad teams stay bad. All right, next question. This kind of ties along. I'm going to rephrase this question a little bit, Tom. So I'm going to ask, instead of will Daniel Jones has a leap this season? If Daniel Jones makes a leap this season, do you think we could have a small playoff run, meaning a win or two, not expecting Super Bowl?
If Daniel Jones makes a jump this year with the defense the Giants have and the secondary the Giants have, if everyone stays healthy, yeah, this team could win a playoff game or two. I'm not going to say Super Bowl, but you mean to tell me that if the Giants, let's say they win the NFC East, they get a home game, they can win a game at home. Maybe they play a team like Minnesota or something. They can win a wild card weekend game. I don't see why not. That's assuming Daniel Jones, takes the next step. That's assuming you have competent quarterback play.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's assuming it. But I personally think if the Giants' rebuild is on track like they think it is, this is a playoff team. There's no excuses. This is either a playoff team or you completely screwed the rebuild at this point. And I'm not saying you have to tear it all down again, because there are some good pieces worth keeping. But if you're not a playoff team this year, it's because your key players like Daniel Jones, starting with Daniel Jones, did not perform. Because if he's a franchise quarterback, he takes this team to the playoffs. It's that simple to me. There's no excuses anymore. No excuses.
So I have a question, Dan, that came from Jordan.
Okay.
Jordan is asking, what does Jones have to do for you to be sold on moving forward with him as our quarterback in 2022?
Well, for me, he has to take this team to the playoffs and also look good while doing so. I'm not saying have like a Trubisky performance where the defense carries him. I'm saying he needs to show that he could be a franchise carrying QB. He needs to show that he could be a win because of quarterback and not just we're winning in spite of quarterback, because I think that's what he is. So he needs to be a win because of quarterback.
I think a lot of people, when they ask that question, and we get that question a lot on live streams, they want a stat. They want, does Daniel Jones need to throw 30 touchdowns? Does he need to throw for 4,500 yards? And it's not that simple, because Daniel Jones could throw for 0 touchdowns in a football game, but he could be the reason why the team won. Like it's an eye test. You can kind of see it. You can feel it. Did Daniel Jones hold this team back from winning, or was Daniel Jones the reason why this team won football games? And if we go through the season and the team goes 10-7, 11-6, and Daniel Jones held this team back, where they lost games because of Daniel Jones, you sit there and you say, all right, he's still not the guy. Even though the record was good, he's still not the guy. If this team goes 7-10 and the defense fell apart or injuries happen, but Daniel Jones willed this team to 7 wins, it's a different story. It's a different story. So as much as, you can kind of sit here and say, well, the team has to make the playoffs, I'm not even going to go that far, because you could tell. You can see it. Is he willing this team to wins? And, if the Giants lose games, and Daniel Jones walks off the field with 1 minute and 30 seconds left with the lead, because he just went down the field and, threw a touchdown pass, it's tough to blame him for that loss if they lose that game. So that's kind of how I would answer that question, and that's the only way that you can really answer the question is he holding the team back, or is he pushing the team forward?
Yeah, because as we were talking about earlier, and you said when we were just chilling in the pool earlier, but you said, like, if Daniel Jones walks off the field with 90 seconds and gives the team the lead and the defense blows it, well, that's not on Jones. That's not his fault. But if he's not. If we're down a field goal with 90 seconds left and he's not able to make those game-time drives, then you don't have a guy because franchise quarterbacks can do that. So my standards are high, but I stand by it. I think we have one more question from Jordy, right?
Yep. And
Last question.
This is kind of just an overall question, Dan. Can you give us some reasons why we should be excited for New York Giant football next season?
All right. Some reasons why we should be excited.
And he also said why we shouldn't. So we'll do both.
All right. So can I do one fun one and one serious one?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Fun one. I'm really excited that we have a receiver who could rap on our team.
I'm not gonna lie. As people that make content about this team, Kadarius Toney / Young Joka making music makes it so much better.
Oh, it's going to be great because, first off, just his name, Young Joka, that's an incredible rap name. Incredible. And you know what? His song, he's got some good raps. I know you said you weren't as much of a fan. I liked his raps. I thought they were good.
I actually have a serious question for Kadarius Toney, who, well-known listener of all things Giants 366. Even before he was drafted, back when he was at UF, he followed the page and everything. Is Young Joka Kadarius Toney? Are they like how like Kobe, when he was on the court, he was the Black Mamba and everything like that? Is Young Joka just the rap version of Kadarius Toney? Is he always Young Joka and Kadarius Toney? Like, is it an alter ego? When he steps on the football field, is he Young Joka or is he Kadarius Toney?
I think I'm gonna play the middle on this. I think he's just Joka on the football field.
Okay.
I think he's just Joka on the football field. And I think when he scores like his one touchdown he's going to score this year because Jason Garrett's not going to know how to use him and Joe Judge already hates him because he skipped OTAs. Like, it's going to be really, really fun to like play as something to prove rap song.
And just a real quick touch on that. It's never a good sign when the media is putting out there that the Giants were disappointed that he didn't show up for voluntary OTAs. Like, give me a break. They're voluntary. Fans also, give me a break. They're voluntary. My boss called me tomorrow and said, "Hey, Matt, you don't have to come in to work." I'm not coming in to work.
Yeah,
Work's
fair.
voluntary tomorrow. I'm not coming in. You would do the same exact thing. So I don't blame the guy for not coming in to work.
Yeah, and one last thought on Toney is that I'm really excited for the fan takes where if he doesn't have like a good year this year, I'm excited for the fans to be like, well, he just should spend less time in the studio and more time on the football field. Like, I cannot wait to see those comments.
That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it will. But my serious reason why I'm excited for next season is that I actually am excited to see if Daniel Jones could measure up because he's got the weapons. We've got some good weapons. And I'm also excited for Evan Ingram. Did I steal yours?
We're going to talk plenty about Evan Ingram, I think, in the next episode. I don't know why you're excited for Evan Ingram.
I'm excited because I think, like we were talking about earlier, off air, is that like with Galladay now, there's going to be a lot of room for him to work the middle of the field.
So you're stealing my take.
Definitely stealing your take.
Okay. Dan, all right. We'll talk about this in the next episode. But reasons to be excited for Giants football. This has the potential. I mean, they were like a top 10 unit last year, bottom top 10, I think, like around like 9 or 10 in points. This has potential to be like a top 6, top 5 unit in the NFL defensively. That secondary is I mean, Jabril Peppers, McKinney, Adoree Jackson, James Bradbury. You keep those 4 guys healthy, and you got yourself a really good secondary. All those guys can cover. That's why I would be, genuinely excited for this football team.
Don't forget about Madre Harper. No, I can't wait till we get that question for the defense episode. What are your thoughts on Carter Coughlin making the next step? No, but I agree. Like Giants fans, again, another rule this year. We should have a good defense. Like Matt said, it should be a top 10 defense at worst. So let's maybe not care about guys like Carter Coughlin or Nico Lalos or...
We actually did get a question about Nico
Lalos, yeah. So let's not maybe care about those guys. Cam Brown. I don't want to hear about them. Like, let's talk about James Bradbury being the most underrated defensive player in the league. Let's talk about Jabril Peppers in a contract year.
Let's talk about the fact that the last time Adoree Jackson played a good season, he was phenomenal in coverage.
Right. Like, he was one of the best corners in the league that year. So, like, that's what I want to talk about with this team. So I agree. That's a lot to be excited about. Now, let's talk about a couple reasons why we're not excited.
Can we both? I think we both have one reason.
Yeah. Daniel Jones?
Daniel Jones.
Yeah,
Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's still a quarterback.
When you look at this football team and you kind of ask yourself, what are we missing? The two biggest things we're missing is the offensive line, which we're going to talk about plenty in the next episode, and the quarterback.
Yeah. Which is like the two most important pieces. That's like saying I wrote a symphony, but it's not going to be played with any instruments.
I bought the car. I bought the Lamborghini. There's no engine.
Yeah. I'm making cookies, but there's no flour or eggs or milk. They're just chocolate chips. Like, that's just what it's like. Like, it sucks. So, it's really that's what it's like.
That's what it's like being a Giants fan right now, and it's terrible. It's the worst.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, we're just driving around like a little toy electric race car. We're like the little kids who's like, dad's like, here, just play with this RC car. Drive it around and pretend it's a real Lamborghini, because that's what it feels like. Because, like, Daniel Jones, Jason Garrett, Dave Gettleman, boom, 3 reasons to not be excited right there. Offensive line, boom.
4 reasons.
4 reasons. But the rest of the team, like, you know, there's some good pieces. Like,
I mean, you know who I'm really excited for, Dan? And I want to end it on this one.
Sure.
I'm really excited for Caden Smith. All those reps he's going to get behind Kyle Rudolph and Evan Ingram. Because that's the other one. It's Nico Lalos and Caden Smith. Please do not give us questions on Nico Lalos and Caden Smith.
I'm more excited for Jonathan Harrison, who's going to be our backup center. He grew up in the town, like, over from us. But I'm excited for him because clearly backup center, that's how you win championships. Depth.
But in all seriousness, there are reasons to be excited. This football team does have good players. I mean, if Adoree Jackson stays healthy and James Bradbury stays healthy, I mean, that's a top 3 or 4 corner unit in the league. And that's the type of unit that could literally shut entire offenses down.
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes down to it, there's a lot to be excited about. But I think at the end of the day, you know, there's a lot to be excited about, but a lot to also be a little nervous about. We're going to talk about the offense and the defense in the next episode.
And I think the lot to be excited about, a lot to be nervous about is kind of where the Giants are. We're kind of floating with that 8-9, 9-8, 10-7 range, and a few balls kind of fall your way, and you're 10-7. A few balls don't fall your way, and you're 8-9, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, that's just the way it goes. But listen, all right. So next episode, we're going to talk about the offense. The episode after, we're going to talk about the defense. This was our first episode of this season, the state of the New York Giants franchise. We'll see you next time.